You probably have a graveyard somewhere in your home. Maybe it is a dusty guitar sitting in the corner that you haven't touched in months. A stack of language books you bought with so much hope, but barely cracked open. Or a half-finished coding project collecting digital dust on your laptop. And every time you look at them, you feel a little twinge of guilt. Society has a lot of names for this. They call it flaky. They call it lacking grit. Or the most famous one, jack of all trades, master of none. The narrative is always the same. You start with intense passion. You consume the information greedily, and you feel like this is finally the one. And then, right when things get serious, the feeling evaporates. You get bored, you quit, and you move on to the next shiny thing. After a few years of this cycle, the self-blame sets in. Cognitive scientists call this the knowledge instinct, the drive to reduce uncertainty. But your brain is wired a little differently. It cares less about having the knowledge and more about the speed of acquiring it. Your brain is highly sensitive to what researchers call reward prediction error. Here is what that feels like. When you start learning something new, say photography, everything is novel. The learning curve is steep. You go from knowing nothing to knowing something very quickly. Because the rate of information gain is massive, your brain floods you with dopamine. It feels like falling in love. The world feels full of possibility. But this is a trap. This is the novice high. Then you reach a point where you understand the core logic. You know how the camera works. You understand exposure. Suddenly, the novelty drops. The learning curve flattens. You enter the plateau. And for your specific brain type, that means the dopamine shuts off almost immediately. This is the fork in the road. A master pushes through this plateau because they are looking for a deeper pattern. But a dabbler quits here. We often call this laziness, but true laziness is a refusal to act. You aren't refusing to act. You are refusing to act without fuel. Your brain is going through dopamine withdrawal. Your subconscious realizes the energy required to learn that final 20% is no longer worth the reward. So you stop. But we need to have an honest moment here, a brutal reality check. Because you truly mastered the skill, or are you quitting because it got hard? A dabbler quits because they hit the first real obstacle. Their ego takes a hit, and they run. That is just fear. And the reason you give in to that fear is because a specific muscle in your brain is weak. We often talk about grit or willpower as if they are magical character traits. You either have them or you don't. But neuroscience shows that
research shows that this area activates when you do something you do not want to do. If you love the task, the aMCC sleeps. If you hate the task but do it anyway, the aMCC fires. If you let this muscle bear weight, it grows. If you don't use it, it shrinks. For a dabbler, the aMCC is often like a weak muscle that cannot even lift a water bottle. Every time you felt a moment of boredom or frustration in the past, you quit. You put the weight down. So now, even a tiny inconvenience, like a difficult chapter in a book or a confusing line of code, is enough to trigger a give-up decision. It's like asking someone who has never run to suddenly sprint a marathon. Of course you collapse. This feeling of weakness isn't a moral failing. It is muscle atrophy. But the good news is that this brain region is plastic. It can grow at any age. Studies on superagers, older adults who maintain remarkable cognitive function, show that they have aMCCs just as thick as those of young people. Why? Because they spent a lifetime overcoming challenges. They kept lifting the weight. So even if you are young, your willpower muscle might be weaker than a 70-year-old who has lived a hard life.
We need to send your aMCC to the gym. But be gentle with yourself. Just like a real gym, you don't walk in and try to deadlift 500 pounds. You will get hurt and quit. You need progressive overload. The rule is the 15% push. When you are practicing your new hobby and you feel that familiar urge to quit, that moment when the dopamine fades and the frustration creeps in, do not quit immediately. But also, do not try to force yourself to work for another 4 hours. That is too heavy. Just push for 15% more. If you plan to read 10 pages and you want to stop at page 3, read to page 4, then stop. That tiny gap, that small moment of doing what you did not want to do, is the rep. That is how you thicken the aMCC. It is a simple, mechanical action. But over time, that weak muscle becomes strong enough to carry you through the long, boring plateaus. That is how a dabbler becomes a master. Now, I need to make space for a very important distinction. Some of you watching this might have ADHD, and for you, the advice is different. If you have ADHD, your dopamine system and executive function work differently. Trying to simply willpower your way through the plateau using the aMCC strategy alone can sometimes be ineffective or even harmful. It can lead to burnout and shame. For the ADHD brain, you don't just need internal grit, you need external scaffolding. You need task visualization, breaking the project down into tiny visible steps so you can see the progress. You need time visualization, using timers so you don't feel trapped inside an endless task. You need body doubling, working alongside someone else to borrow their focus. And you need gamification, adding artificial rewards to replace the missing dopamine. As I mentioned in my previous video on job crafting, you need to engineer your environment to support your brain. If you suspect you have ADHD, please use these external tools to assist your aMCC, rather than just blaming yourself for being weak. There is one final barrier we need to address: boredom intolerance. The reason the plateau feels so painful is that your baseline for stimulation is too high. We live in a world of supernormal stimuli: TikTok, Instagram, sugar, video games. These things flood your brain with effortless dopamine. Compared to a 15-second video, learning a language or practicing an instrument feels impossibly slow and dull. Your brain is calibrated to high-intensity noise. So when you try to do the quiet work of mastery, you feel like you are suffocating. You need to actively treat this boredom intolerance. You need a dopamine reset. This doesn't mean living like a monk. It means
When you sit down to engage with your hobby, put your phone in another room. Turn off the music. Allow yourself to feel the boredom. We usually read boredom as a signal to quit, but actually, boredom is the clean slate required for deep encoding. It is the feeling of your brain shifting gears from consumption to creation. If you can lower the background noise of your life, the signal of your new skill will become clear again. So, here is my proposal for you. We are approaching a fresh start. I want you to give yourself a 6-month challenge. Pick one interest, just one. It doesn't have to be tied to your career. It can be anything. And commit to sticking with it for 6 months. Forget about becoming a world expert. The aim here is simply to experience the deliberate practice phase. Your goal is to hit the plateau, feel the drop in dopamine, feel the weakness of your aMCC, and then do the work anyway. Use the 15% push. Train that muscle. Find your baseline. Once you prove to yourself that you can push through the dip, you will unlock a new identity. You will realize that the label of dabbler was always temporary. You are evolving into a polymath in training. And once you have built that muscle, you will be ready for the next step. But for now, download the free guide in the description. It has the interest audit and the specific protocols to train your aMCC.
Pick your one thing. Lift the weight. In the next video, we are going to talk about the Polymath strategy, how to structure a life and career that honors all of your different interests instead of forcing you to pick just one. I will see